big welcome to everybody on this webinar called Introduction to Conscious Health and Bioinsight, which we'll find out more about later. This is for anyone interested in understanding the profound direct link between emotional trauma and physical health for themselves and their clients, and to use that information to work with the roots of physical issues. My name is Peter Donn. I know some on this call already know me. I've been an EFT trainer for the last 12 years, amongst other things, training in Hertfordshire, London, sometimes other cities like Dubai and Singapore and the States. As many of you know, EFT is a powerful method of helping with emotional challenges and trauma, but people find it consistently works well with physical issues. I did train a few years ago in something called Meta Health, which is a model that strongly connects specific emotional trauma to physical issues. Although most of my EFT work is related to mental and emotional conditions, I also work with physical issues. I found the system to be extremely accurate. I was working with a gentleman with prostate cancer a few years ago. And in Meta Health, this is related to, linked to not feeling like a man. I asked him at the session, what happened in the months leading to your diagnosis where you didn't feel like a man? He told me he had been married and had an 18-month-old daughter. One day he went home to his wife and she told him she was having an affair. And then a bigger shock followed, that his daughter wasn't his. In that session, we worked to release that shock with EFT, and by the end, he was deeply peaceful for the first time since that experience. Now, 2 months later, he came back for a follow-up session, and he said he'd been tested for prostate cancer and had been given the all clear. The astonished doctors asked him what he'd been doing and to write an article about it. They had no idea. They've never seen that before. As a trainer, therefore, I wanted to bring this understanding, this model to my trainees. I've known Sam for many years, and this is her passion, and she lives and breathes this stuff. She has the ability to make it easy to understand and apply, which is why I decided to ask her to run a 3-day training for us. This is starting Saturday 23rd of November in Hertfordshire, quite close to the M25. In that training, we'll be making use of EFT, but you won't need to know it. So Sam, if you're ready, or just to let you know, for those on this webinar at the end, we'll be giving a little link to get a little extra discount off that training in November, which we'll be holding until the end of Sunday. So Sam, if you're ready, I can hand over to you.
Is,
yeah.
If we put it on a slide, they couldn't follow the link. If we put it in the box, they can follow the link. So we'll put the link in the box so everyone can click and go there straight away.
Great.
So they'll have it directly.
Great. That's in the chat box.
Yeah. So,
great.
To follow that, and of course we can put it in a follow-up email as well.
Great.
So very exciting. I'm as you say, I do live and breathe this, much to I say my husband's annoyance, but he's kind of used to it, and he does make the most of it too. Once you understand things in a new way, it's very difficult to go back, but we do have habits, we do have ways of seeing things that we've had for a long time, but it's very interesting how our home and house life and family life is very different when you know this information, because even if you have a symptom now that's similar to one you maybe had in the past, your understanding of it is so different that you can't go back to being in the place you were before. And that for me is the most fundamental development and learning of this information. So yes, I've done a lot of therapies and a lot of work, but it's the understanding of what's really going on that makes the biggest difference. So I do have a set of slides to explain the 7 steps. This is a kind of general overview of the steps going into mastery in the middle, which is kind of making that lifestyle change. So we all go in and out of once you've learned EFT, you kind of do it and do it and do it and do it, and then people admit, well, I haven't done it for ages, and then they start coming back to it. I've never known anyone that's done it, had a rest from it, not come back. We learn how important it is, and it kind of just becomes a natural part of life. But with understanding our biological survival and healing intelligence, nothing else then falls outside of that, because every response we have begins to make more sense. So for me, this was my step towards learning and understanding and loving myself. And if we know the general setup about I love and accept myself, you'd be surprised how many people don't or find it difficult, or who'd like to, but have these understandings or beliefs that make it very difficult. So I've combined my understanding of the biological intelligence with parts integration, and that kind of grew out of being an EFT and matrix reimprinting mostly practitioner, and my experience in Bosnia, and then discovering that a lot of people didn't want to go back to something, but they did want to change how they felt about the past now. And they did recognize through our kind of teaching them about the flight, fight and freeze, that there was a part of them that was kind of encapsulated and stuck. So we developed a technique that we could do very safely in the present, by addressing that part was holding everything. So really the analysis helps us find what parts to go to. And then the techniques that I've developed help us to process the past event from the present with everything that we have now. And we don't go into story. We really stick with the deeper understanding of consciousness. And well, I'll use the slides to explain my understanding of that now. So I promised Peter that I would explain what is the difference between bioinsight and conscious health and metamedicine. Now, I didn't get around to the slide, but I do have this beautiful diagram that I made. So I'm going to bring it a bit closer and just give you a bit of an overview, because it is good to understand the lineage. Now, I can make a better version of that for Peter to put out to people. But basically, in its simplicity, the bulk of the information, of the biological information, is based on the work of Dr. Rike Hammer, and he's now passed away, and we can understand why, actually, from his symptoms. But he made some very, very fundamental connections, very, very fundamental understanding of seeing the relationship between very specific events and our biological changes. Now, the question arose in him because he saw his son get shot, and then when his son Dirk passed away, he developed testicular cancer, and it was through him having been healthy, deciding there has to be some kind of connection. He just felt there was a connection, and he was in a position to do something about researching that. But what he actually did, so if you find, because I've got these other words scattered around, but Dr. Hammer was not the first person to understand that stress and trauma and traumatic events affect our health, okay? But what he did do, which is unique to him, is in putting together some of the concepts and some of the research that is existing scientific areas of study, he was able to take the CT scans of the people he was researching with and asking and interviewing, and look at their CT scans and see not only was there a particular mark in a particular part of the brain that actually controlled that tissue, but consistently for every single person, he was able to see those marks in their CT scans. And just last week, Dr. Anton Barder, who is the founding member of the International Metamedicine Association, was over here in the UK teaching us how to read those CT scans, and it is incredible. So we were able to look at someone's scans and say, okay, so this person has a hearing conflict, has had issues. It's an old one because the marks in the brain are different. And actually you can tell not only the size of the impact, how big a traumatic experience it was, but how long it's been lasting, whether it's coming and going, whether it's faded and it's an old one, really incredible. So that was the huge contribution that Dr. Hammer made. But actually, ontogenesis and the ontogenetic development of the embryo is an ongoing area of scientific study. So he was able to put that together with the triune brain and how the brain is structured, together with understandings about microbes, which is, again, not his area of study. We've adopted Pasteur's concepts about microbes, but at the very same time as Pasteur, there was Béchamp, who said, you know, I don't think we're being attacked by microbes. I think there's something going on with them. And he had a completely different idea. Unfortunately, his idea didn't sell drugs, and the other idea did. So that seems to be the one we've adopted. But actually, there is plenty of research, and now actually quite a lot of research at the moment about measles helping with various other cancer and things like that. Now that all fits with what Dr. Harmer was trying to explain. So we won't have time to go into all of that amazing stuff, but you know, in the training we can touch on all of this stuff that that is happening at the moment and see why that's coming and why that's now fitting. So Dr. Harmer was teaching his stuff, how he put this together, how he could identify very specific traumas. So with the first body of research he did was with ladies who had ovarian cancer. And as he was interviewing those ladies, he found that they all had the same type of trauma prior to the onset of their cancer. So over the many years of his research, he then basically collated the information, which is this book. This is about nearly £100, but this is the basic and most kind of the core information. But Aaron Antonovsky was already talking about coping with stress and now how we should be focusing on health. And, you know, all of the, even Tesla and Einstein, lots of people were kind of on the same page, let's say. So Dr. Anton Bader and Johannes Fisslinger wanted to set up with Dr. Harmer to teach this and create a university and actually train people to use this. They saw it as a huge benefit, as Harmer did. But Harmer was a little bit cagey because of his personal experiences, and he didn't really want to get involved with these two amazing guys. So in the end, they went away and they set up IMA, the International Metamedicine Association, and really began to train coaches. And one of the coaches they trained was my master, Rob van Overbruggen, and his company is called Help for Health. And so I trained with him and I've trained with Anton. And that's when I set up Into Alignment, and that is as I've been growing in my experience. However, I decided I also wanted to train in German New Medicine. So I've also gone to the two main ladies who are always arguing between themselves, Ilse Dora Laker and Carolina Marcolin. And I think technically Carolina Marcolin is incredible. So I've trained with both of those also. And really now IMA has become the Meta Health International. So I'm still a member of that, but I have set up the Conscious Health Institute to train my conscious health coaches. And I'll explain why I've done that a bit later. So basically, we've got things like Peter Levine's, Dr. Robert Scare, Bessel van der Kolk, Babette Rothschild. I've done training with all these, especially with Babette in trauma. So my understanding of trauma has really developed, and working in Bosnia was a huge part of that. But then we've also got, you know, I've trained with Cole Dawson, but we've got people like Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, Rupert Sheldrake. These really, you know, Greg Braden, and I'm looking a lot at Nassim Haramein at the moment. So my areas of research and training and understanding are extended well outside of that kind of core information, which is what makes what I do different. But basically, alongside me, you've got people like Richard Fluke's doing his ACE work. You've got Lifestyle Prescriptions, which is now Johannes' work. You've got things like, this gets recommended a lot, the Biogenealogy Source Book with Christian Fletch. He's doing it. There is another guy trained, Gilbert Renault is trained by Claude Sabat, who was trained by Dr. Harmer. So you've got different people taking this and integrating it into what they do. And actually, Penny wasn't on there at the time because she hadn't got a name, but Penny Kroll is now calling herself Meta Consciousness. So we're all really bringing our other expertises, but the core of the biological information remains the same. It remains that understanding that the body is not making a mistake, And if we can understand what it's doing, then we can actually work out, what to focus on, where to go, what to do, and how to work with that. And understanding, and if it's okay with you, I'd quite like to just explain why your client had that adaptation and why it changed, if that's okay, but i.e. the actual tissue and what it does and how it works.
Sure.
Okay. So now we've got, I put you, this was for my students, you are here. So I'm now training you, and we've got, I've specifically, because of my training, and I've trained in psychotherapy and other things as well, I decided that I wanted to make my training much cleaner and safer, because this is one of those things where a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing if you don't really have the kind of ethical and moral grounding in how quickly it can take you into somebody's traumatic experiences. So I wanted to set my own standards and my own ethical kind of structure to teach people about how to be a coach and how to set and contract and set a stable relationship with somebody, so that they could then do a safe analysis and a very holistic analysis with somebody about their symptoms and their behaviors, because those are also symptoms. And then to understand the therapeutic intervention and teach them safe ways to intervene and safe ways to teach clients how to work with themselves, but also to assess the readiness for that client to work on their trauma. So a lot of the coaching program is about helping the client understand their situation, the ecology of their change, the really the safest way for them to address what's coming up, and their resources. What are the resources they already have? How are they using those resources? How can you structure more resources to get them in the position where it's safe for them or not? So my coaches have to take the 7 Steps to Conscious Health program by themselves first to have that experience. And as a coach, the ongoing work as a coach is to ongoingly address your stuff to make you as aware and as conscious a coach as you can be of what is your stuff, what is, what are the boundaries, what is the relationship, and what is your job, and what is your responsibility and the client's responsibility. So that's kind of built into the way that I teach this program. So that's the overview. Does that make more sense to you as well, Peter? Possibly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I think it's good because what's trying to happen with mental health is they want everyone to be here doing their own thing. But my input to them working that out is that you have to be clear on what is the core information. So it's okay becoming more esoterical or becoming more spiritual with your work if that's what you do, but actually the biology is the biology. The body is doing something very specific. And I think my background is teaching, my core beliefs from my childhood about being understood and being empowered with information. So really that comes through in my teaching, and that's what I want to give to everyone else. So that's the driver from me, if you like. That's my part of knowing my need for people to understand what's happening. So I think I'll just share the slides, and then we can talk through. But what I'll check first is I've got the questions box open, and obviously the comments chat box is also open. So if you have anything that you want to ask or anything that you want to say as we go, feel free. And obviously you can do that to Peter or you can do that to myself. And I'll keep I've got another monitor here. If you wonder why I'm doing that, because I'm looking at the other monitor in case any questions pop up. So what I'll do is I'll share the slides, and okay, who can share? Only the host or panelists? Okay. That's a new. So we'll share my, okay, now hang on, because I've got, that one, that's it, lots of windows. Okay, so we're gonna play. So hopefully you see that nice and clearly, and the welcome. Now I'll warn you, I'm not normally a slides person. You may have noticed I'm a talky person, but I'm very visual also, and I like pretty pictures. So I've combined pretty pictures with lots of talking. Some of the slides I will not hang about on, because they're literally just for you to follow visually what I'm saying. So there is a lot of information in this, and obviously this is an introduction and you're not expected to remember it, but I can promise you that if you come to the 3-day training, you will have a much clearer understanding. And even then you won't need to remember it. And I'm telling my coaches, actually, you don't need to remember it, but you'll understand how to reference it, how to find it, how to go there when you need that information. So I'll be teaching on the course as therapists, or as somebody who wants to kind of understand their own stuff. So I've got a message coming up. Look, I'll be teaching exactly what to do to go through the 7 steps and go through the understanding and make an analysis, a general analysis. Now I've got a message, but I can't make my cursor go over to it. Might have to unshare so I can get my cursor. Peter, can you see the messages as well, or is it just to me?
Yes, I can. I'll respond back.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because my cursor's stuck now. Okay, so there is a kind of I don't know what you would call it. It's not a disclaimer, but just to explain that this is not a replacement for a medical diagnosis. This is for educational purposes, and really to get to the genesis, to help you make connections with the triggers that you experience and to original events. Usually we would work with a medical diagnosis. That's the best way for us to work, to be honest, because we need to know what the tissue's doing so that we can then say, well, this is very specific and this is why it's doing it. So, and I'll use Peter's example in a moment. So to explain what conscious health is, it's kind of changed. Initially, it was the kind of conscious awareness that the body has an intelligent response, and it was becoming aware that something specific was happening and that we can have an impact on our own health and well-being. But the more I developed conscious health, the more I realized the conscious part's more important than I realized. And it's now kind of evolved into understanding that there isn't a body, mind, spirit response. We talk about these things like they're separate, and they're not. There's just a system and fields of information that work as a system. So really, conscious health has now come to really mean that there is this singularity, there is this totality of a system within a greater system, a universal system, and that the unity of that system is really what we're experiencing. And we may be only seeing facets of it, but when we can see it in its totality, we can understand it very differently, and therefore we can know what to do. And Peter, please do feel free to jump in at any time. I really would like, to feel you can ask questions or make comments and statements.
Yeah, sure. Actually, Sam, is it possible to have just one slide at a time, because it'll come bigger on the screen and be.
Is it not doing that?
It's coming up. We can see two slides at a time.
I didn't have that. So let's have a go at that and see what's going on. Hang on then. You should have just the slide. Something very weird is going on with my. Yeah, and I lost my cursor too. So you should have exactly that. So let me see. And I can go to the messages as well. Okay. Let's try again. In fact, just one moment. Okay, so while I'm doing that, I'll explain about your clients, because I think I need to. Yeah, it was the presentation, not the screen I shared. But I've got 2 monitors, and for some reason it's got a bit confused about my monitors. That's what seems to have happened. It doesn't like it. So I've only got one set of slides open. Let's have a look. That's right. So there it is. And let's do it again. I'll come back. I know I've got it. I'll come back to you, Peter. Let's do it again. Keynote again. Try it again. So I get I thought I get the 2 on one and 1 on the other. Tell me again, is that better?
We still have two slides.
No. Okay, I'm going to try it another way. I'm going to put the 2 slides, the thing on the other monitor. And then if I press play, is it coming up? No, it's not doing it, is it? I've got a monitor issue. I'll tell you what, I'm going to unplug the other monitor and then see if it does it now. Okay, do it again. It doesn't have a choice now because it doesn't have another monitor. Okay,
There we
better?
go. Perfect. Yes.
So, I've still lost my thing there. So, we are now talking about the unity. I've lost my cursor still. Okay. So, what I decided to do, in fact, I'm going to have to stop sharing again because I can't see it because you're in the way. And my thing is gone. There we go. Right, I'm going to go from there. Okay. So it's become an integral part of my work to talk about consciousness in the bigger picture. And Nassim Haramein is somebody I'm very interested in because he's a unified field physicist. And I've got this real kind of exciting understanding of how that works and how that is relevant to what we do. So I'm going to get rid of you again. You're coming up all over my screen. It's very difficult to see what I'm talking about. Okay. Close the chat box.
I can turn off my video. I don't know if that helps.
No, it's something to do with my monitors because what's happening is when I share it, I'm getting, so if anyone can address their messages to Peter, that would be better, because when I share my slides, I lose my cursor and I can't go to the boxes. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to just have to close the boxes. There you go. I'm just going to talk now. That's it. So I realized that the 7 steps that I came up with, when I looked at them, they actually covered the key issues that most people have. Most people feel that they're stuck. That something is, you know, you go to the doctors and you get a diagnosis. You've got this. You've got cancer. You've got this. And we go away thinking that's it. We've got this. Whereas actually, any time you go to the doctor, it's a slice in time. On that day, this is what the reading is. And everything that happens in our body is in a constant state of change. So the fact that we get a diagnosis or we self-diagnose and think, I've got this, doesn't make any sense because nothing is static. So one of the biggest problems we have with disease is that once we've kind of made a decision, we've got something, it becomes self-perpetuating because we begin to behave and we begin to actually focus on the symptom. And actually the symptom, by the nature of symptom, is a symptom. It's not the cause. A symptom's a symptom. It's the end result of something happening, and we need to figure out what the something is. So one of the issues is that we think things are static and that they can't change, even to the point where, you know, like Peter said, when his client went back to the doctors, they couldn't understand that it had changed, well, in a positive way. That's a big shock. But we only make a prognosis of things going downhill. What you need to bear in mind is when you have a diagnosis and a prognosis, that is given based on statistics. And those statistics are taken from people that stay in that system and don't do anything else. Anybody that goes outside of the system and gets help from somewhere else or does something else isn't usually counted in the statistics. So it stands to reason that the statistics they use to give a prognosis are based on the people that have a slow and steady decline and die as a result of actually not doing anything else or taking any kind of responsibility or making any other lifestyle changes. If you were to do a study of everybody that goes and makes their own lifestyle changes and begins to do self-work and self-healing work, and then the results would look very, very different. So remember, when you're given a diagnosis and a prognosis, those statistics, you're not one of those statistics if you're looking at this kind of stuff. So they don't really apply. Okay. So the other problem we have with disease is random. It's just happened. Oh, I've got a bad back. Oh, these things happen to me because I'm old. Or, it runs in my family and it's happened to me and now I've got it. So we have this sense of things are random and that we've got no idea of how that's connected to anything else in my life. We might maybe think it's got a bit to do with what I'm eating. I'm not doing a lot of exercise, but really we just think it happens out of the blue. Now there's a reason for that, and it's to do with timing, which I'll make clear a bit later. So we make the focus of our trying to get better the disease and the symptom, not what needs to happen to allow the body actually to heal. The body knows how to heal. The body knows exactly what to do. We're just getting in the way of it doing it. So if we focus on the disease, we're still focusing on what's going wrong. We're not focusing on health, which is the difference between Aaron Antonovsky and what metamedicine was bringing, is the salutogenesis, as opposed to actually looking at, which is the study of health and what is good, rather than pathogenesis, and which is the study of disease. So really, if our focus was on health and not disease, we could do things a bit differently. And we still have the Newtonian view that the body is a machine and it breaks down. It's mechanical. It's not conscious. It's doing something and it just goes wrong for a reason we don't know. What happens because of this and because of what we've inherited is we give away our power. We think somebody else has to fix it for us. We want somebody else to do something about it. And we don't realize how much of an impact we're having. So we fall into this trap of being powerless, given away, the permission to heal, permission to actually heal. And that's based on the diagnosis and the prognosis and, we know best. And well, a doctor is doing an admirable job at figuring out what your tissue's doing and then using statistics to predict what could happen. But actually, you're an individual person, and nobody, not a single, doesn't matter even if you've got an identical twin or somebody who's had all the same experiences as you, they can't see them from your point of view. So you are unique, and understanding what's going on is unique to you.
I think to add into that, in terms of giving away our power, I mean, often we have no idea at all what is behind our physical symptoms. And so it's this big unknown, which can, if it's a serious disease, it can be really scary because you don't know which direction to head. You don't know what to do about it. And so it's one of the reasons I love what you're talking about and this whole system, because you've got something to get your teeth into and address.
I gave a half an hour chat with a lady who was seeing if we could work together earlier, and just hearing in her language and hearing her symptom and then the way she talked about her home life instantly connects why she has the symptoms that she has because of what's going on and how she sees things. And it's actually was connected to her values and how she was brought up and how that was causing dissonance for what she wanted for herself. And it's exactly as you say, suddenly when we start to see how amazing we are, how amazing my body's adapting, rather than be so lost in what's going on, even if we don't yet know, as long as we've got the concept that it's not making a mistake, what is it doing? How is this helping my survival? And again, not focusing on the symptom, because what you're ending up with might not be the original reason it started changing, but you may have got stuck. That's why you're getting what you're getting. So like you say, Peter, when we can start to feel there's some direction or something to start to investigate and look at that shows me what's going on, everything's very different. So that helps us with actually 6 and 7 is to come back to trusting what's right for me. What is it that is making me unhappy? What is it that is uncomfortable for me? What is it that is pulling me in two directions that I don't have a way of handling, that my body is trying to adapt to, which is ultimately what it comes down to. And I've now changed, and as I start writing the next book, I'm writing about the disease paradox, because the irony is all of our diseases are a response to either a real or a perceived threat to survival. And if we were to understand consciousness and our existence much better, we actually wouldn't be afraid of dying. So think about diagnosis and prognosis. If we weren't afraid of dying, we actually would not have our diseases, because we wouldn't be trying to adapt for survival. So there's this incredible paradox of actually you're kind of dying to try to survive. If we know what's going on, we can break that cycle. So yeah, so we've lost this cause effect relationship. We don't understand, and this is what I now teach people to do. So that kind of came down to, we don't know where we are and what's going on. We don't know how we got there and what caused it. We don't know what's going on when these things are happening. We don't know what that means. We don't know what to do about it or how to do it. And we don't know how to live with it and make a lifestyle change. And that's basically what the 7 steps to conscious health are. So they're the ownership of know where you are, perceptions, know how you got there, triggers, know what's going on in the patterns. So we're looking for patterns and relationships. Interpretation of what those patterns mean in the tissue and therefore what that points to. Management of how to start looking at your resources and how to change the things you can change. And the understanding of knowing deeper where to go to make the deeper change, and then how to live your life with that information. So these have now developed into understanding that there is no mistake. There is a higher order of intelligence. We have this template, this blueprint of what health is. The body knows exactly what to do. And conscious evolution, consciousness is evolving all the time. So if we've lost touch with that, then we end up in kind of survival mode. But the next slides will tell us about that. So perceptions is really your local fields, your family fields, what information you've been downloaded, what's predisposed you, your genetic predispositions that's been passed on through genetic change for survival. Okay, through learning from your parents what's safe and not safe for survival, what's a good person and not a good person to be in the tribe. How do you be the best person, or how do you survive? So we've learned these things. We've inherited a way of seeing the world that as we evolve might not fit anymore. And because it doesn't fit for us, we end up with this dissonance again. So we've individualized these experiences now into our own stuff and our own perceptions. And that's where we can start making the connections. So the bioinsight is really my interpretation of Harmer's specific biological understanding of what's going on. And that's the actual analysis part. The management really is to look at how is that then connected to something deeper. And I've got a case study of a lady that was on my 7 Steps to Conscious Health course. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, there's a really cool way to look at this. And because I could see her problem was in one level, but in her language and explanation, there was a lot of other stuff going on that made this a fuller picture. And that's actually been quite transformational in my work. So understanding all of that connection, using heart conscious healing and parts integration, which is the technique that I'll be introducing in the training, and then how to do something with it.
The heart conscious healing and parts integration. Do people need to know EFT, or I guess we can get into exercises where at least some people know EFT, or will they not need to know?
So the heart conscious healing is more about understanding what it does. Actually, is if you do EFT, it helps you understand why it works, because this is an explanation really of what being in coherence means and what being out of stress and being aligned to allow, so whole brain state, aligned and balanced. It's how to get into that state very quickly. Now, some people can get into that state with EFT. Some people can get into that state, then EFT is more effective for them. So there is a part of this that we can do some tapping. I usually do tapping or holding and breathing, but actually it's more of a breathing technique. But the important bit is the underlying concept of what's actually going on, which means that once we understand what a part is and how a part is encapsulated, it's basically just unfinished business. A trauma is where something didn't complete. That stays in the amygdala, and the amygdala cannot process time. So it doesn't get moved into the part of the brain that kind of puts things in time and space. So the whole process in the limbic system of the hippocampus and the hypothalamus and all of the other parts of the limbic system help us to chronologically order things. So even a trauma, as long as we can put it in the past, we can build resilience. But we can't build resilience if we're actively still surviving a past trauma. So the heart conscious healing and parts integration, it's as much an understanding of the process of healing and how we heal, and then the heart alignment is a breathing technique, and then a eliciting the part and a parts integration. But at some point we can use color mirrors, sense and smell, tapping, movement. So there's all kinds of ways in which you can help to process that, and tapping can be integrated. So we'll do that with people. Okay, so there's some questions coming up. So my technique has evolved through these 7 A's. We will not heal something if we're trying to reject it. If it's dissonant to us, it will wear us out. If it's constructive, think of resonance, it makes us feel good, that will build us up. If we've apexed it and it's not relevant anymore, actually we won't even notice it, which is a good thing, because it's not relevant, and then we can be with or without and it doesn't matter. If we're fighting against something, or we're fighting cancer or we're struggling to be well, or rejecting the part of me that I hate myself when I do that, okay, if we're doing all of that, we are creating more dissonance, and we become adaptive and then maladaptive, and that is disease. So until we're aware of the part of us that's doing it, we acknowledge and accept that part, appreciate it has a purpose, align ourselves and align the part, assimilate the part, and then bring it in, into us again with the new learning and understanding that we help the part get, then that's basically evolving our consciousness. So the process achieves that part by part. So this, I love and accept myself. The way I put it is we're learning to love ourselves one part at a time. Just pick a part that you don't like, accept it. It's like a self-reparenting process, really. It's now time to become your own parent, and parent of the parts that are stuck in time and space in their past trauma, needing somebody to acknowledge them and validate them and integrate them. Okay, so that's really the kind of teaching of the process. I've got a million slides, so I'm going to blast through them now. Okay, so there's the steps. So know where you are. The 7 myths are really to look at the big picture, rather than us being disconnected, the illusion of separation in this experience, and that kind of idea of the body, mind, spirit. We've kind of broken it down. Really, we're born to survive, and we've forgotten that we're a survival animal. We can, I do this thing where we can about, we can all about being 100% spiritual. Well, if we are, then we wouldn't be here. So our reason for being here is to learn how to be here and be spiritual. And you don't transcend that by rejecting your animal self and the lower vibrations. It's about coherence and integration, and constructive integration of those frequencies. I need to have the lower vibration to be here, but raising my consciousness and awareness is not to reject, and transcendence is not transcending the lower vibration. It's transcending your previous understanding into a broader bandwidth of awareness. That's raising consciousness, and that means you're integrating your vibrations into a symphony of harmonic resonances rather than this dissonance that is causing destruction. Does that make sense? I'm between models at the moment. I'm developing this new language, so you're kind of getting a little bit of this is how it was, and this new language is how it is now. So we need to break down the difference between symptom, trigger, and cause. If you focus on the symptom, the analogy I use is, if your bathroom's overflowing and the sink's overflowing, we notice that when the bathroom's flooding and the ceiling's falling in downstairs. So going upstairs, we definitely need to do some work with collecting the water that's overflowing. And modern medicine is kind of in a constant state of coping with mopping up and dealing with trying to mask and fix the symptoms. What we really need to do is focus on, why is the tap still running? It shouldn't be running anymore. So if we can not, be anti-doctors and anti-treatments, because we may need that, but at the same time, we need to focus on what is making your tissue do that. Why is the tap still running? Let's work on that while we maintain as best quality of life as possible. It comes down to, what is the quality of life that you want to have, and there's no point rejecting treatments from the doctor if that's helping improve your quality of life. But if you really want to stop it happening, then you need to do the other stuff too. So I'll show you the diagrams about self-referencing cycles in a minute, and the understanding of how we perceive things, delete, distort, generalize. If you've done NLP, you'll recognize those things. So harmonic resonance, our parts are the dissonant parts that are still struggling, and we can't integrate them until we give our attention to them. Because when we give attention, we give energy, and in giving energy, we change the vibration. Then they can be integrated. In its most fundamental sense, that is how perception works. Perception is and from our heart, electromagnetic energy. And if we allow something to be with us that we can understand it, then we can change from this point of perspective in the moment, our understanding of it. So that's what we do with the techniques. So yeah, resilient, the cloud. So we have our own cloud, we have our own fields of information. And there's a new thing I talk about, this feedback, feed forward loop. What you feed into your memory is what comes forward to make you what you are tomorrow. So we need to know that the past and the future can't exist without the present. The past and future, by their very nature, only exist by the virtue of the present moment. So the only thing you need to focus on is the present moment. So what you do in the present moment will change what you put into your memory, which then changes what comes back forward, and what you can call it attract, you can call it manifest, whatever, but it changes who you are tomorrow by what you do today and remember, and then, end up doing the next day. So we have an activation step exercise, obviously not in this, but in the course, 7 levels of activation using those 7 A's. So here's the basic graphics. Is that okay? I know I'm going very quickly, Peter, because there's a lot to throw in. Okay?
That's okay. In terms of timing, I'm just wondering whether we should make it, I don't know, about another 20 minutes and then have questions. I mean, I want to...
Okay. I literally am going to, the pre-frame is much more important.
Yeah.
Because all I'm going to do with the steps is just show you the pictures and explain what we will do. Obviously, I'm not going to attempt to do that here. I'm going to show you the pictures and show you what we will do in the training, and obviously in enough depth for you to be able to go away and you'll have the materials to understand it.
Great.
So the concept really is that we have the body, mind, and spirit. But what we've done is we've kind of got stuck. So a lot of people talk about rejecting my ego and being disappointed in my body. But the point is, if we don't have some sort of sense of self, what we call a field integrity, you can call it a container, but actually it's just vibration. But I need a me to be able to see a you, to be able to interact with it. And what we've done really is we've separated them. And in fact, we've kind of lost this connection to the fact that we're never separate. So our diseases come from really self-referencing about my thoughts about me here and what my body's doing. And I'm kind of forgot that I'm not separate, because I'm in an animal mode and I need me, I need food and water, and I need sex, and I need to carry on my species, and I need to be in the group, and I need everyone to like me, and I need not to be left out because then I'll die, because that's what happens to animals in the tribe. So we've forgotten that there's no kind of separateness, and there's actually no death either. We'll change, but our fear of death is causing us very big problems. So we self-reference between each other, and these kind of self-referencing beliefs perpetuate our symptoms. Okay. And so the nature and nurture, which you can't see because it's on the right in there. Our nature is to heal. our nature is we're not supposed to come here and have nothing happen. There's no point. Our nature is to have adverse experiences, new experiences, and to integrate them, to evolve our consciousness and collective consciousness. If we don't do that, then really we're drawn to do it. We can't hide away, we're drawn to do it. But the nurture part is where we learn what's safe and not safe. So although it's in our nature to deal with adversity and to heal, where we learn what's safe and not safe comes very individual to us. And that's what makes us get our individual illnesses and responses. Okay? Just a pretty picture of some of my graphics showing how it all fits together. So to know how you got there, we have this nature and nurture, the innate biology blueprint and our survival mechanism. We need to get specific. So we need to look at how those values and those things that happen to us and everything we've inherited gives us that view, which makes us respond differently. So the guy who got the prostate cancer, it may be that every man whose wife leaves him and goes off with somebody younger and he finds out his daughter's not his, will have a shock conflict. But not every man will feel that he's not a good enough man. He's lost his manhood and he's not good enough. And it's very much combined quite often with our values and what we learnt.
I just want to add in that he got married quite late, and he was in his 60s, early 60s, and didn't have any other children. And so that was his only proof of that he was a man. So when that was taken away from him, I think it was a very big shock because there were no other opportunities going forwards.
So here's how Peter made the connection and knew what to ask is, if someone has a prostate issue, we know what kind of tissue it is, which I'll show you the pictures in a minute. But we know that tissue increases when he's under stress and in trauma, because the prostate makes the ejaculate that spreads, that ejaculates the sperm. And that ejaculate is what enables a man to spread his seed more, okay? So if we have a shock that that's not my child and I've lost my manhood, his body says, okay, you have to spread your seed more, make more, do more, and it will begin to increase its function. So the prostate begins to increase its capacity to make the seminal fluid and the ejaculate to actually get him to be the man in the tribe again, to be the man of the tribe, to make more babies and to get his manhood back. And of course, it's very much tied up in his self-perception and his chance of having that again. And if he's older, then definitely. So as men get older, they start to lose that sense of their manhood in the tribe. And of course, you can see how they get slightly enlarged prostate. But that's how we know that's because that's what that tissue does, how that's related to that kind of event. So that's how Peter knew how to ask about that. Okay, so we look at safe to change, we look at the health plan. So these are really the steps and parts of the program as we go through it. We look at individual health profiles. What is it about you that makes you feel this is important and not important? What are your values? What makes you feel that this is important and this is like your identity? I use this as a way of helping people find out the ecology of change and what is. So once we've started to identify what the symptom and behavior is, we do this with clients to say, well, what do I have available? What are my resources? So something like this, so that it helps them to start to look at where they need to address getting the resources set up so that it becomes safer to work on what they need to work on. Because there's a reason underneath that's not, that you have that issue. So it could be that I know somebody who wanted to lose weight, but they couldn't because if they did, their husband would be very upset because he's very insecure and she might leave. Now, there's other issues underneath that, and this helps us work out how to make things more stable to begin with. So, step 3, not going on. Understanding that that we're born to survive, that we have a cycle of evolution. The slides for all this later. That we're designed to grow with resilience, but if we don't complete the program, we can't do that. And that nature nurture is what decides how we're impacted by that. The autonomic nervous system changes under stress, and then when we're in rest. And we do a lot of work with the polyvagal theory to understand how social connection makes us safe before we actually go into flight, fight, and freeze. And I'll show you in a moment the two phases. So Peter, this is my way of talking more technically about the two phases of disease, the stress phase, because we have homeostasis, which is balance. But actually the technical term for maintaining balance, but more like that, is allostasis. So they're both trying to get balance, but when we're massively thrown out, it's called allostasis. So the two phases really is an allostatic load. And if we've got more than one stressor, then that allostatic load gets out. So really we maintain a trauma. Thanatosis is the freeze response, where we're locked into that freeze. And if it's not processed and released like animals in the wild do, then we're basically adding to our allostatic load. And if you can look up on Wikipedia allostatic load, it explains it from a medical point of view. So cause of disease is really looking at all of those things. Retroactive trauma, either if the trauma's not happening to you now, if you're not being beaten over the head now, if you're not in a relationship that is a threat to survival, if you're not in a war zone or in a tsunami, it's a past event, then it's a retroactive trauma, i.e. it's still unprocessed in the amygdala, and it's your go-to, because in the freeze, you hold all of the information about the danger and about the way you escaped it, survived it. Now, but there's a part of you that has something unfinished that doesn't realize. So it's keeping doing the same response. So the survival that you did at the time is important, because we want to keep that. It obviously worked. It was good, but we don't want to relive it every day. So processing the event means we can keep so when I work with people with anxiety, we just say, okay, let's not take away the anxiety, because it's obviously got a purpose. And people go, oh God, thank God for that. And then actually we start looking at, well, why have you got it? And then having a choice about response is different. Okay, moving on quickly. So demand and recuperation. We have the stressor. We have symptoms of increased heart rate, glucose. All of these things happen in the general fight flight. And then when we come away from danger, the body comes back to normal. It goes through a phase of repairing. Everything goes back. But we might get symptoms here. And this is why, do you remember I mentioned sometimes people can't make the connection because their symptoms seem random? It's quite often because the symptoms are in the second phase. So they're not connected to the original trauma because they didn't happen then. You were adapting to the trauma at the time, okay? And then when you actually come away and you're like the little rabbit, you go, then all infections are all second phase, where your body's using those wonderful microbes to actually get rid of tissue you made in the stress. And so the guy could have had, who had the had the prostate, he could have had an infection. He probably had TB in his prostate, actually, because that would have eaten the tissue and taken it away. Anyway,
I thought that was one aspect of mental health I thought was particularly interesting, that it's usually we go to the doctor when we're in phase 2, when we're in the healing phase. So just when the body knows what it's doing, that's when we go and take some action.
And it can be useful to manage our symptoms. So if we had a very acute threat to survival, and then we've got a very acute symptom, so a really bad bronchial cough, for example, we might need to monitor that and reduce it a bit, again, for quality of life. But if I completely try to get rid of my symptoms, I run the risk of putting stress on the tissue. So when you put steroids and cortical steroids on your skin, you actually put them back into stress. So it gets rid of your symptoms because you're coming out of that. But actually, you're then damaging and thinning your skin. So that's why when you stop taking them or putting them on, it comes back, because now it's going, oh, now I can heal. Okay. But we don't like the symptoms of healing because it's red and sore and angry and gets cracked. But actually that is it trying to heal. And of course, because it's about contact and separation, I then think, I can't have contact and separation with people. So then I re-trigger myself, and that's when we get in the loop. But we'll talk about that in the training. Okay. So quickly moving on. So really it's about understanding there's a potential threat, and actually we're aiming for understanding before things happen how things work, so that we don't create symptoms, but at the very least, we're learning how to come out of them. So knowing what it means, lots of pretty pictures. We're not going to stay in the information because there's too much. This is a full course. Embryology is how the tissue developed in the womb, how we developed as an embryo in the womb. And Dr. Harmer made the connection between how the brain is organized and how the tissue is organized. So he has discovered that if we break up the brainstem, which is the most early part of the brain, and the cerebellum, which is kind of as it comes more developed, and then the newer brain, the cortex and the cerebral medulla, you've got the older brain responds in one way, and then the newer brain responds differently. But there is a very specific theme to the way the tissues that are controlled by these areas respond that is actually related to our evolution. And the way to think about this is, in the 9 months that the embryo is in the womb, it goes through a whole evolution from the tiniest single-celled animal through to the amphibious, through to the reptilian, it goes through in 9 months a full evolution. Okay, and I talk a lot about fractal and about nested information and holographic information. It's a whole evolution in 9 months, and the brain is organized to manage different tissues. So as the tissues evolve, the very early parts, brainstem, actually controls the most fundamental inner germ layer tissue. So when we break into different tissue types, we have an inner germ layer, a middle germ layer, and an outer germ layer. And the tissues that are in these organs have these particular responses. So the brainstem organizes the tissue that is fundamentally to do with digestion, reproduction, and air and water. My absolute basic needs. Then when we get a bit more complicated and we began to move around a bit, and so you think of a crocodile and crocodile skin, everything that's controlled by the cerebellum it's a bit of coordination, but it's to do with all the meninges layer, the pericardium, the pleura, the peritoneum, the parts of me that protect my organs. Then we get into the newer brain, and when we're becoming more mammalian, and all of the inner part of the medulla, of the cerebral medulla, not to be confused with the inner part of the brainstem, which is the medulla oblongata. Medulla just means middle of something. This controls the musculoskeletal system, brain, the actual tissue of the bones, ligaments, tendons, muscles. So everything that is affected in those tissues has been controlled, or is monitored, if you like, by this part of the brain. And then our most complex, most advanced is the cortex. So this is all about social territorial. This is our outer layer. So all of our skin and our brain and our nerves are all to do with contact with the world, contact with the outside world, the really complex stuff of being interactive in the world. So
can I just
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, the beginning at the beginning you were talking about CT scans and reading CT scans, and those different layers of the brain control, I don't know if control is the right word or not, but controls those different organs. So you can see mappings with each of those layers directly to different organs. And so at each of those levels, you can, by looking at slices of the brain, you can see in each of those layers the relevant organs there and how they're affected, whether they've got into, whether that person has been affected by an emotional shock that affects those specific organs.
So I've got some pretty pictures. So this is the main tissue that is controlled by the brainstem, okay, and it's the endodermal germ layer. The reason he's glowing green is your dermis, not the epidermis, but your dermis is also controlled. So if you've got acne, think about protection, integrity, being dirty or soiled. You literally need to be thicker skinned because of what you think someone thinks of you, or that you feel, somebody's going to attack you. Medulla is your musculoskeletal system. and then the outer skin and the brain. So you're quite right. If we move on to these pictures, when we slice the brain, what Dr. Harmer did was he documented all the parts of the brain that controlled, control's not the right word, but the tissue gets its information from there. So now we work with these charts, and in these charts, we can see that if there's a mark on the CT scan in certain places, so you see in the yellow part, this is actually the part that is the brainstem within the CT scan. So those two little ones at the very, very front there, so at the top would be where your nose is, and the bottom is where your back of the head is on the cushion. Those two would represent the kidney collecting tubules. So if someone's retaining water, which the body does if it feels isolated or abandoned or like a fish out of water. So if we feel we're going to be alone and we're in unfamiliar circumstances, or we can't be connected, we retain water because we need it. We don't know when we're going to find it again, and we need it. And it would be visible in that part of the brain with little circles and marks as to this person has kidney collecting tubule issues, or it would appear that when we did the training, a lot of people have got hearing conflicts, and those red circles show actually this is the cortex, but the cortex is coming underneath, so it's like going like that. And inside the brain underneath, which is why they're red, that's where you would see a hearing conflict, not the eustachian tube, which is more fundamental, but I don't want to hear that. Okay. So this controls these tissues and these kind of tissues, tonsils, pituitary, mostly the stuff that is in the inner digestive. We've evolved and it has got more complex, but these types of tissues. Okay, we're not dwelling on this, so don't worry about making notes. Okay, so the cerebellum is these parts, and it's usually these tissues. And then the musculoskeletal system has this little homunculus inside. It's like a little full person. In fact, the brainstem is a full person too. And it's responsible for the, can you see the head at the top, the knee at the bottom, and the feet, and the shoulders and all those bits. That's and you can see those red circles around the outside. That's because when we slice the brain like that, we actually see where the parts that control or connect with the musculoskeletal system are, but of course the cortex is outside that, covering it. So you've got your brainstem in the middle, you've got your medulla on the inside, and then wrapped around that you've then got the cortex. So we start to see that. So this part of the brain, we can see that it controls tendons, ligaments, joints, muscles, and then it gets more complex in this part of the brain. So once we start to see this part, we know we can look for various tissues that connect us with other people. So even if it's an outside, if it goes in and up your nose, or into the vagina, or into the nipple, it's ectodermal, but it's where we have that kind of crossover. Okay, there's a brief summary. And I can send that for people to have a copy of that.
I just want to add in, I had a client who had like multiple physical issues and many issues, and was working with the medical establishment over time, and she did actually have CT scans, and we sent it for interpretation and got the results back, and they listed every organ that was affected. And of course, once you've got the organ, you know the emotional theme and the trauma, and she went through them, and she just said she was astonished. She just said a whole trauma history was listed on this piece of paper. It was absolutely spot on.
Me and my husband had ours done and sat with Anton, and he did them. And Vic, I mean, obviously I knew how it works, but Vic was just like, how can you know that I broke my ankle a long time ago and it's now healed, or that I had this kind of, you know, and it really is that incredible. So I mean, I would say I'm getting quite confident of being able to do it myself now. I'd like a bit more training, but it is so if I was not sure on what someone's symptom was, and what the doctors were saying didn't seem to fit, to have a CT scan, we would easily verify what the tissue is. So we're not going to do all this today, but the way we work out is Either we have a literal response, I am being attacked, or somebody is on this side of me. But if not, we need to understand, how are you then interpreting the world? So the next step is really know what to do about it. So understanding we've got this mind-body separation, that we've been hardwired to see the world a certain way, and that we're kind of seeking confirmation, trying to create safety. We really have this metaphor and this response to survival. So really what we're doing with that experience is we're trying to put that back together. And a shock conflict, it's called a UDIN quite often, is we don't have a strategy. That's the problem. This has never happened before, and it happened so suddenly and so quickly. I've got no exit, no strategy, no resources. That makes it a threat. So until we can evolve our meaning of it, we're stuck, really. But that's why we're here. So if we look at the adaptation, this is what we need to know in order to be able to make an interpretation of your symptom, to be able to know what to look at. So we need a medical diagnosis. We need to know how often is it working. If it's something like chronic fatigue or lupus, we break them into separate tissue responses, because somebody experiencing something one way is slightly different to another. You know, if you've got 4 of these 7 things, you've got lupus, doesn't mean anything to us. We need to really break it down, and then it can build back up again into a very clear picture. But each tissue is different, has a different theme, different response. So we need to know the specific tissue, the organ, its position and purpose. If it's the skin, why have you got it on this elbow? Why have I constantly got this little bit of eczema there? It's about contact and separation. Who do I want to be in contact with? Well, I'll show you what, and I get it there. Okay. So it's because when I'm speaking with my tribe, I hold my phone like that. So I'm in contact with my group, my people. And then when I'm sat at my computer, I'm right-handed. So I'm again in contact with who I want to be in contact with. Okay. The point is, why am I worried about not being in contact with them? That's what I need to work on. Okay. Position and purpose is important. And then the brain layer and the theme, because that's what tells me that information I just told you. Then we can work out, what am I conflicted about? What is my issue about being in contact? What am I afraid of? Why do I go into stress that when I contact these people, I get eczema because I'm healing? Remember the telling you before, second phase. So when it comes back, I must have had a worry about not being in touch. So that's where we know where to go. So we can look at the triggers, we can look at the patterns, when it comes and goes, getting very specific, and then looking at how that fits with what's going on in that theme, okay, and getting the meta messages deeper. So levels of reactions, same slide. Musculoskeletal, this is just to show you where it is happening is relevant. Your ankle does a specific job, your head does a job, your elbow does a job. So if you've got an ache or a pain in a particular part of your body, it's about being stronger in that part. It's not, if you have an ongoing bad back and you lift boxes for a living, that wouldn't cause a bad back. That would make your back stronger, like going to the gym. Okay. If you've got a bad back, something's not healing, and that's usually because there's something underlying. So even if you have an accident and you break something, why was it so easy to break? Then there's probably a program running. You know, if 10 people had the same accident and you broke your knee and I broke my back and someone else broke their toe, that represents really where there's programs running and there's a weakness. Okay. So here's an example. On my training, a lady wanted to figure out why she got a stomach ulcer. She got her acid reflux. Now, we explained it's about social territorial, because there's a part in the stomach that is actually this ectodermal tissue. And she had an incident during the training which perfectly proved to her what it was about. She had a massive bout of reflux when her son called at very short notice and asked her to babysit. The mum was going out and she was angry because this was her time, her space. And she was angry with him because he had been drinking and had a hangover. That's why he couldn't do it. her thought was, I am being invaded on a day that I have planned quiet me time, and they know I'm feeling a little unwell. I'm working hard to complete a course this week, even though I'm knackered. So that triggered her being angry with him for not caring it was her space. However, she had another thought I heard. And she said, I can't understand why he's drinking in excess and why I have to have the children again. And that I have to go several times. You know, I just can't let this go. This is starting to really bug me. So this was, and you notice that I've colored that yellow, different. She also said, you know, I'm constantly over nurturing and I'm worrying about my children and grandchildren in order for them to survive. I have this fear that if I don't protect them and look after them, then they won't. Now, I know every brain layer has a tissue response, and there's themes too. There's themes of behavioral change. So this woman helped me develop a new understanding that she's saying these things, but the trouble is she's getting an ulcer about her territory because she feels she's got to do everything and look after everybody, and she thinks it's her job to do that. And she's angry with him because she doesn't understand why he's not being a better dad. And those are all her stuff, but actually they're all different tissues and brain layers. So I'm now able to use this new model to work out what's the deeper issue. She's getting this issue, but she actually also has irritable bowel syndrome and severe knee problems. Okay. And actually it causes a different type of behavior. She goes into megalomania. Oh, it's all down to me. I've got to do everything. Okay. So here's her different issues. I can't digest this. She thinks, oh, it's because she's competing with her sister. So she's got a brain stem, a cerebellum, a medulla, and a cortex. And actually, she's got all these different behaviors, which we'll talk about in the training. She changes her behavior. She changes her body to try to cope with this stuff. And here's I can't even think about it. I don't care what anyone thinks. These are our responses on these brain layers. So all of this makes a very, very clear picture of the meaning she's giving to herself and the world that is driving underneath to cause those symptoms. Okay. And I know this is a lot of information, but I really want you to get that there's nothing that's a mistake. It's a beautiful balancing act of adaptations in the way we see things. And so the detachment, for example, means I'm really hurt because I feel attacked, but so I'm not going to think about it. I don't want to feel what I feel. I don't want to even feel what you feel because it's too much. So all of these have a megalomania is I'm not good enough. So I'm now going to believe I am. Either I'm a megalomaniac and I'll tell you I'm the best at everything, or I'm the one that has to fix everything. That's still megalomania. Okay. So this lady had a symptom, another symptom, and 3 other symptoms, and a reaction, a perception. So she felt I'm invaded. I need to understand this and I need to be stronger. Her beliefs are, I can't maintain my territory. I need to know or understand why it's not safe to let go. And I'm not good enough. So the meanings are all underneath it. So, and that's what helps us understand where to go in terms of the deeper picture.
In the training, Sam, are we going to learn how to kind of break that down? And yeah.
In terms of, just to go back to that, in terms of meta-medicine and German medicine, everybody else doesn't go into the behaviors. They're all so advanced and they're all so complicated. I teach them first to my coaches because they're what you hear people say. Or, you know, the fact that she said, I have to do everything and you know, the kids are not going to get looked after if I don't do it. That's a much bigger issue. So I know she's got musculoskeletal issues and I know that she's got stuff going there. That's a really big perception. She wouldn't be getting angry with him if she didn't have that running. So hearing people's language and understanding behaviors is a key part of this. So I teach it first. So we'll do all about the main behavioral things, what to listen to. And then you can clarify. So I had somebody in a training who was saying, telling me about arguing at home, and then when I said back to her the problem, she said, no, it doesn't resonate. I don't get that. Well, a fear of confrontation can cause a fly-in constellation where I'd rather be out here, and when I'm up here it's like everything's fine, it's not me, it's everyone else. So she told me the problem, I told it her back, and then she said, no, I'm all right with that. So it was a really good demo. And in fact I said, you can clarify this because it would cause bronchial issues or asthma? She said, oh, I've had a cough for about 2 years. And I was like, okay, there you go. So this is all connected. And if we can see the pattern, it's really beautiful way of helping someone see how they're adapting. I want to be out of the situation, or I'm trying to dilate my bronchi to get more air in case there's a confrontation, or actually someone leaves. It can work for both ways. So this is a good way of helping me maintain myself in the situation. Okay, quickly moving on. This is, I'm very quickly, this is to tell you. So disorientation in time and space. I don't want to wander far from home. If I've got a fundamental brainstem issue about my basic survival, I actually get confused so that I don't wander off and I stay close to home and I don't go into danger, basically. So think about abandonment of old folks in old folks' homes when they suddenly start getting disoriented because they've been left abandoned and they go into this disorientation. And I've put there funguses or fungi are what help us in this tissue. Cerebellum, be thicker skin, protect myself. So you can see the acne at teenager, and what is the response when we get lots of acne? I'm not bothered. You know, this teenage rites of passage. I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered. Yeah, whatever. Okay, that's an emotional detachment, because actually I do care. I care very much what everybody thinks, but psychologically I adapt. It's not a strategy. It's an actual psychological adaptation. Medulla. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. So guess what? Yes, I am. I am good enough. I'm so good that I need to tell everybody that I've got a great video of the Donald Trump. It's about 20 things of no one does this as good as me. No one does this as good as me. No one does this as good as me. It's just an embarrassment, but it's a beautiful demonstration of somebody with huge I'm not good enough issues. And so it can go that way, or it can go, you know, you can't do this without me. You need me. I'm the one that's going to fix everything. I'm very wary of people that go into become therapists who still think they've got to fix everybody, suggest they've got a lot of work to still do. This is something I look out for. Okay. And then the cortex. The cortex has many adaptations. We call them schizophrenias because it is a personality shift, but things like the flying constellation, nymphomaniac is a particular one, or Casanova if it's a man, or aggression. Eating disorders are here. They all have a very specific purpose. Okay, this is the form that we use to kind of make notes on each thing. And moving on, I'm getting there now. So we're looking and listening for a polarity. I don't want to be responsible for everybody, but I think I've got to do everything. Yeah, or a part of me wants to be a modern woman, but I learned that a woman behaves like this in my family values. So where you've got dissonance, your body is in a constant state of trying to adapt to that dissonance. So we have a negative and a positive, and actually we need to kind of apex those. We need to process both of them, because the flip side, if I feel I'm not good enough, the fix of I'm not good enough to be good enough is still not a fix, because you've still got good enough and not good enough. When we don't care if we're good enough or not, then we can be good enough or not good enough, and it doesn't matter. So all the time you've still got the positive, you have the fear of the negative. So understanding that you need to process the fact that that means so much to you means that until you kind of let that go, until you process where you learned that defined you, then you're still going to be defined by it. So there's a part for either. Okay, so we do the parts integration with heart healing, and this is now heart conscious healing. So very quickly, we use the information of the tissue and the behavior to find the part that is struggling with that right now. We're not going into the past. We find where the part is saying, but I want that, and the other part that says, but you can't have it. So the part that says, I need to compete to be better because my sister gets more attention, but the other part that says, but I don't want to compete and I just want to be me. And we work with both of those parts, and we integrate them, and we use the ABC of heart conscious healing, which is alignment, attention to the heart, breathing in and out of the heart, and then connecting to present. Actually, it's changed a lot now. So all of the parts that are split and basically in need of alignment, we use those 7 A's. We do things like part solicitation, and this is my this is from another training, but it's a lovely picture. We learn about heart coherence and alignment and how being in a whole brain state makes it safe to update that information, because the part that is encapsulated is in a sense of not connected to consciousness and to something greater. We can, and there you go, I thought I'd add that because it's a tapping do. We can then use tapping to process that past event and the information about the event. But for me, the whole thing is about knowing, what are you doing when you do that? Why do you stay with the client's words? Because it's about them, not you. And those words are coordinates to where that information is. Why are we looking for a part? Why is that part, why is it not working with that part? Well, because there's another part that says no. So then we need to look at that part. So we look at why things work, why they don't work. Why is it safe or not safe to do something? And then we put it all together into understanding that a shock trauma isn't just from the past. They've all happened in the past. But guess what? You don't have to go in the past because they're all here now. So we've got euphoric experiences, past trauma, and missing events. And we'll talk all about how those all can cause you to get stuck. Okay. So we look for anything that is not processed and flowing with you, that you are stable now. And then we will look at what I'm calling your first field family, reparenting yourself. And guess what? It doesn't matter how much you work on yourself here. So this was me after all my work. I'm all my self-developed. I'm all brilliant. And then as soon as you move outside your comfort zone, you got to do it all again, really. And that's what growth is. Growth is the process of being stable, then going into chaos, and then being in harmony, and then going into chaos. So every time you grow, you will have something to work on. So the plan that we use to help clients is looking at all of these areas: the physical stuff, what can you do with movement, what can you do psychologically with your thought patterns and habits, emotional work, connecting, finding out what it is that makes you feel good and in flow, being of service and being connected with other people, how to make your environment and your nutrition supportive of healing.
Can I just Helen's asked a question about when working at emotional themes, and sometimes you don't know. Obviously, if you've got a CT scan, you can see what's going on, but if you don't, especially with syndromes, where there's this kind of big set of symptoms not necessarily related to certain organs. We were talking yesterday, there were certain kind of questions you can ask to track down. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we talk to somebody, somebody will have a specific symptom. So like the lady who I was using as the example, and because we know the tissue and we know its purpose, we know what it's trying to adapt to. So if someone's got a symptom, like if somebody's got a syndrome like lupus, for lupus, you would sometimes have arthritis, very specific places. You quite often get this butterfly skin effect here, and you have nephronitis. You have a problem in the kidney, and that's usually the biggest problem. But if we know that the kidney is about processing water, it's actually to do with the water conflict, a drowning incident or a near drowning or a fear of drowning, and that could be your own or someone else's. And then the arthritis and the musculoskeletal, we now know, is I'm not good enough or strong enough. So quite often those are related, but they're not always related. So the reason we break them down is we would ask on the theme of, have you ever had a drowning experience, seen someone else? Has anyone in your family ever had that? And it's incredible because it's always consistent. There always is something. And then you would talk about what that experience means. And just by starting to understand how they talk about that, we can start to understand, did they did they have to save somebody? So I know somebody who had severe arthritis and had his kidneys replaced, I think. And his sister nearly drowned on a lilo when she was very young. And he did save her, but it was incredibly traumatic for him, and he'd never processed that. So his musculoskeletal system was about, he'd still in his psyche had feared that she was going to drown and that he had to be able to save her. So all of his almost his whole body is still in the stress, and in the stress of the bones and muscles, they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker until he fixes that, until he processes that. So he's getting a little bit of respite, and he's getting some arthritis, which is the swelling, but actually his bones were so incredibly weak. So he had severe osteoporosis, and that was connected to the drowning, but it isn't always. So we do a timeline for each separate symptom, and then we look along the timeline to see, did they occur at the same time, or did that one happen here and that one happen here? And now you've got all of them, and so we can call it lupus. Or did one event, bam, 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 cause all these tissue changes because that's what had to happen? And we couldn't, you couldn't process that event. So it becomes very clear to people on a theme. You know, I've got a bad back on and off, on and off, on and off. I've got fatigue on and off, on and off. We look at when do they meet, when do they cross over, when are they easier? This whole getting people to come out of their generalization and ask them, well, how much and how little. And so we can get a very clear picture of how severe and how often a symptom comes, and then we can see how they lead to us to the events that occurred. And sometimes they're one event, sometimes they're multiple. But like the example I've shown you, my recent development is on each level, we look for a behavior and a tissue, and that very quickly helps us start to get your belief structure. And that helps us define the underlying way that you're seeing the world that is leading to the patterns of behavior and the symptoms. So it's kind of, I've had this evolution of, rather than looking at one level and going straight in for, you know, I could have spent a long time with that lady trying to fix her acid reflux, but actually she's triggering that with her other beliefs. So there's ways in which we can ask questions to find out, how are you seeing the world? And knowing the themes and knowing the tissues mean we know what to ask. So the lady who had the flying constellation had a cough, an ongoing cough. Absolutely perfect, because that's exactly the tissue that is related to not wanting to get in a fight or confrontation or lose somebody. That means that your bronchi was dilating, but when it can't, and you're really, really stuck and you think something's going to happen, you just go out and you go, oh no, everything's fine, everything's all right, I'm okay. And your psyche changes. So we can quite quickly draw quite a clear picture to know where to go. And the reason this is really important is it makes it more safe to work with a little bit of knowledge. And this was my issue before. So I aren't in 3 days going to train you how to be a full health coach. You're going to have literally the overview of the tissues and the themes and the behaviors. But by using this new model, you will more safely be able to draw a picture and know that it's not about leaping into the trauma. It's about helping someone understand their belief structures and building on that until they're ready to work on the trauma, if at all, to be honest. So
it's another question, again from Helen, talking about, you mentioned anxiety, and I think one thing that surprised me from the training that I did was that you can actually get kind of mental or psychological conditions like manic depressive and megalomania, and I assume anxiety is in there as well, that are also created from a constellation of specific traumas. So it's not just physical issues that can come from this, but certain blends of trauma then seem to create these mental disorders.
absolutely.
Do you want to say?
If I could give you, sorry, Peter. If I could give you one takeaway, whether you took the training or not, and bear in mind this is a 3-day training, and you know the stuff I've thrown at you in this is really a personal sort of 7 3-hour step. You have 3 hours per step to work through, or to become a coach is a full 3-module training. But the one takeaway is Nothing's a mistake and everything has a purpose. So even your anxiety, even your depression, even the thing you don't like, remember that you or your client is focusing on the outcome that they don't like, but it has a purpose. And they're not aware, or you're not aware of what the original purpose was. You're just seeing the results because they're stuck. Because the process is supposed to be adaptation, get to safety, go into repair, get stronger. Animals can do that in the wild, but if we have an event that we can't complete and we then come away, we then continue to relive it. So anxiety is a fear of frontal attack, and we can actually even interpret something coming from the future as a frontal attack. And so I need to go into a really strong hypervigilance in order to actually be able to cope with something that's coming that I can't cope with. So every tissue has a job, a very, very specific job. Your liver has a specific job. Your lungs have a specific job. The bronchi is a bit different to the actual alveoli. Everything that happens. And to protect the tissue, if we are totally overwhelmed, then we also have this adaptive behavior. But it's only meant to be short-lived to get us to safety. And the reason we get stuck is we are constantly triggering it. So that if you could take one thing away, it is look for what's underneath it and what is its purpose, not the actual symptom as it is now that people want to change, but what did it originally want to do that you never concluded that you're now stuck with. So the actual original change is not necessarily meant to make this ongoing pattern. It's because it's stuck. So if I were to say to you, think of a lemon, really concentrate on a big, fat, juicy lemon. And if I cut that lemon and I cut it a wedge and I'm going to squeeze the wedge, and just imagine sniffing it. And in a minute, you're going to lick it. Just get ready to lick it and really, really smell it and smell it strong. Okay. You may notice something happen to your salivary ducts in your mouth. That's normal. There's no lemon. Okay. You did that with your thoughts. Now imagine if you just kept doing that. There's no lemon, but imagine that you're constantly thinking about that. Eventually your salivary ducts will kill. You'll keep changing and changing and changing, but then they'll start to malfunction, will maladapt because there's no lemon, nothing's happening, and you're keeping sending a signal to the body to do something, and it's not meant to do that. So as soon as we turn the tap off, we know why we're doing that, which is based on a situation, but our belief about the situation as well. Two people can have a trauma. One person will process that trauma. Another person will give it a different meaning and not be able to process it, and then go forward with maladaptive behavior because of the meaning they gave it. And that will be to do with their original conditioning and value structure and everything else. So we can help on the tissue level, or with this new model more easily look at, well, where does that, what's that sitting on top of that we can help you more holistically. So what's the point? Health, quality of life, peace of mind, to be able to have your passion and purpose. Because everything that you give a meaning to, you update, you upload that to the collective conscious. And if we're in fear and suffering, and if we're in fear and separation, because we think we're just this animal, then that's what we're feeding back. And the more we feed that back into our own field, the more our response is survival, not consciousness. So here's my little picture about somebody who's evolving their consciousness. There's their heart field, and actually there's the consciousness. Imagine that that's our consciousness. But actually, we all have a consciousness. Down here, I feel separate, but I'm not separate. Actually, the further we go, we understand it, the more we're connected. And the more we evolve, expand our bandwidth of consciousness, the healthier we are, because the more we actually bring that consciousness down. We are actually sharing and expanding consciousness. So there we go. If I come out of that, I don't know how to stop sharing. There we go. There's a real crash course there, Peter. I can now see the comments, which I couldn't see before. I am sorry about that. So thank you for sharing the comments and asking me. So yeah, so let's have a look now. What have we got? So yeah, so just to reframe again, that is strong visuals to help you just let that go into the subconscious. You're not expected to remember everything. It's the concept. Nothing is a mistake. Nothing is random or by chance. And by understanding it, at the very least, the core concepts, that in separation and survival mode, we can trigger survival responses. So we're kind of higher evolved to a point, but then we've forgotten that we need to keep, be spiritual, but actually we have an animal body. So it's for me, conscious health is about bringing it all back together and not trying to reject my animal body or my bad back or my, I will resolve that the more I understand how intelligent and how conscious and how part of consciousness I am.
Great. Thank you, Sam. That was one hell of a whirlwind tour, but it's very exciting actually, that there's so much potential now for working with our symptoms in a much deeper way. I just wondered if there's any questions from anyone, just briefly. I know we've gone.
So there are some questions there. So if I work, because of the thing, if I work backwards, it doesn't mean I've forgotten whoever at the beginning. So if I work it from the end, so can you make practical changes? Example, make sure the baby spends more time feeling connected to the mother. Absolutely. There are very specific needs, and the theory I'm working on at the moment is how we're activated as kids. So actually, right as babies. So even from the beginning in utero, or even prior to that, actually in the relationship, it is about the everything that we've got predisposing, precipitating, and then perpetuating parts of a situation. So preventative is better. So making sure as a baby that needs connection, we're tribal animals. So making sure a baby has everything it needs. It's not cold, it's not hungry, it's not afraid. Making sure it's connected, it's in contact with its mother. It can feel its mother's heartbeat. It's not taken away at birth. When a baby's born, it's still getting oxygen from the placenta. For about 2 hours, it can still breathe from the placenta. That's where its oxygen was coming from. If you whip it away, cut that, and then it starts having breathing issues, and then you take it away, which is a separation issue, which causes bronchial issues and contact and skin issues. That's why kids that get asthma tend to also get eczema, because usually the separation from their mother has caused a fear and a skin to skin. So absolutely, and the health plan that we use gets people to look very practically. So the German New Medicine idea is, if you've got a territorial anger issue, then go in and shout and be angry or punch your neighbor will be a resolution. But obviously they're not encouraging to do that. But the point is, that's one level that you can resolve it. And if you've got we all might have an individual issue like that. Okay, but if it comes and goes, if you're seeing that all the time, if wherever you go, people are in your space, if wherever you go, you're angry with everyone, it's more likely to be something a bit deeper. And then really you want to look at what's going on and what's the retroactive stuff that is making you feel territorially defensive and that you can't maintain your space. So then only practical stuff's not quite enough, because you're still in the problem. But if you can become, preventative by making sure, then really that's the best way. So yeah, everything a child needs, everything we need. We're in a society of capitalism and me, more, survival of the fittest. This is all brainstem fear stuff. It's not really tribal behavior. In tribal behavior, we share everything. We care about each other. But we're in a sharing environment where we're all afraid and kept afraid, so that we're in brainstem, mine, my this, my that, don't kick off, and we're behaving very reptilian, very separate, very want the fear to go away. I want to kill it before it kills me. That's not really how we're meant to be. So, but the more I can set it up that I'm not afraid, then the better it is. Okay. Sorry, questions. Okay. Yep. And you can come back with questions, obviously, but come to the training. People haven't.
Yeah. And if people have any questions, I guess more technical about the training itself, can they contact you directly, or shall I go through
They
me
can
first?
contact
Or
directly. I mean, because this has been so intense, if we have a lot of questions, maybe we can do a little half-hour call and just answer questions as a follow-up. I wouldn't want to people to feel they can't ask or clarify anything,
that's
and
fine.
obviously them to have the details. But the thing is, each part of this in itself could be a training. So the level you'll get at 3 days is a more in-depth overview with a more in-depth bit of each part. But then heart alignment is a 3-day training in itself, and the actual analysis part in itself is it's like a week's training, and then reading CT scans in itself is another week. So I wanted to throw every step at you in every part, because there may be a bit of it that you're most interested in, and then you'll see how it fits in context with each other.
But
So
that's going to be enough for people to make a really good start in terms of looking at physical issues and knowing which direction to head, what to
because
work
you'll
with.
have people that are good at EFT and good at this, and then now they might think, well, I like that bit and I like that bit. Yeah, if I just have an intro to it all, that bit's going to be good for me and that bit's going to be good for me. So, you'll take away from it the bit that is most useful to you, but we'll make sure that you have the overview and the way to introduce the questions to your clients in the safest way. That's why really for me, you need the overview, because you need to see where I'm coming from with the questions, which is slightly different to the earlier way it was done, really. So
Yeah,
the concept I wanted to give you, really.
great.
There's a few more questions, Peter. I know people need to go. Relative to loss of contact, which is felt animal level. Well, let me have a look. That relates to loss of contact, which is felt. There's different aspects of loss. Loss of contact is different of loss of a person, which could be, it actually is different on every level. Loss and feeling abandoned is a brainstem issue. Loss of contact, loss of my partner, and actually it's my identity, because when I lose somebody, I lose who I am as well. That's actually medulla, and that affects a different part. But also then loss of contact with somebody can be a cortex issue. So knowing how someone experiences loss will affect your language and the way you talk to somebody.
Just one question about whether there'll be a recording available, and that's the case, isn't it? I don't know whether
that's
it's
the other reason why I could throw it all out, because
yeah,
now you're going to go back over it very slowly and just listen a bit at a time. So yeah, I thought let's
exactly.
give it you all, and then you can take your time later. So you'll have a link to go to it.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, if people have other questions, you can send to me, and I can gather them together. If there's quite a few of them, we could schedule, a shorter follow up to answer them.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate people need to go, and obviously you need to go. I'm very happy to answer these questions now, just so people don't feel we've overlooked. But if you go away or watch it again and have more, then I can give you a general answer, but obviously you will get a more in-depth answer in the training, and again in the context, and also in the training I'll ask you what you do and what you enjoy about what you do and how you do it, so that I can make it relevant. I will make it so that your takeaway will be the most useful to you, because that's what matters, so you can own this. So loss and separation. So I'm just having a quick look. Somebody asked about a bladder issue. A bladder cancer can be one of two things, because there's two types of tissue: a very ugly situation that someone has to deal with and can't get rid of, or a territorial marking issue. I can't define my space. I can't mark my space. I can't set boundaries. I can't hold boundaries. It's usually an ugly situation that I can't get rid of, because that one happens in the stress. The other one has to be a boundary issue that I've resolved but not properly, and keep doing and not keep doing that, and that develops differently. So quite often it's the trigonome, which is a brainstem tissue, which is, I need to clean this away, get rid of this, and I can't. How does function in babies? Yeah, none of these are thought patterns. All of these have a very primal biological function to help me in a stress or trauma. They become triggered by our thoughts when we start to give them meaning. So a baby that cries, a baby that changes its bronchi because it needs to breathe more, or it wants its contact from its mom, it's not thinking about that, it needs that. So every tissue is a change to cope with something I need or can't have, or something. It's either something coming in I don't want coming in, it's either an overwhelm of something or a lack of something, or something I don't want and I can't get rid of. Everything, because else homeostasis is everything in balance. So every illness is a lack of something coming in that I need, or too much of something coming in, even if that's a person, or something I can't get out that I don't want. Okay, it's danger coming in and I can't get away, or so they're all very, very real, primal threats to survival, but they're meant to come in, be processed, and then be dealt with, and we go back to balance. So what we do as an intelligent human, I use the word loosely, is we give a meaning to that. Oh, that means that. Oh, so this is going to happen. Or I was taken away from my mom. That's an experience. Now, when I see someone going away again, I don't want that to happen again. So this is when we then begin to trigger them ourselves, or be triggered by events following. We're basically seeking to heal. I call the constellations, Peter, resolution seeking behavior, RSBs, because actually they're meant to change so that I can resolve my issue to get back to balance. So I mentioned anxiety. We did anxiety. So often with the organ affected, we can work out the emotional theme. Yeah, that's really what happens. Well, from the tissue, we work out why is it changing? What's the adaptation? And then, because we know what it's changing to, we can know what kind of event, the fact that that's not processed because it's showing a symptom, and therefore how might that person be processing that or trying to process it, and then that can help us understand the emotion. I've missed what happens to the tissue. So most people won't work with a CT scan. They'll just come and say, I've got asthma or I've got eczema. So give me an example. And we've just done trigonoma. Give me an example, a tissue, an illness. Let's test me. Just see if I can give you an example. We did the prostate. I'm trying to think, can't think of an example, that's why. Acne. Someone's got acne, it doesn't directly tell us their emotion. What it tells us is that somebody needs to protect themselves from something that they feel is either an attack, fatty liver, okay, or an attack to their integrity. So they're feeling they need to protect themselves. Now, if we know that's what the tissue does, being thicker skinned, we can ask about being dirty or soiled, or feeling concerned about what people think. Interestingly, thing about integrity is it has to be a projection, because we are mind reading what someone thinks. So we can start to figure out what their emotions are around protecting themselves, what people think of them, where they've been attacked in the past, why they need to do that. So it leads then into us understanding that. Okay. So fatty liver. So when we get a medical diagnosis, it really helps to understand what that means. And fatty liver, it has a specific meaning. So different things happen in the liver. The liver's functioning in and of itself, well, it has a lot. Actually, in fact, it's the organ in the body that has the most functions, but it basically helps us break down food. And really complicated ones, diabetes. So when we have an increase in tissue in the liver, the actual liver tissue, the parenchyma of the liver, it's because we're afraid we're not going to get enough food. So we're basically trying to get more nutrients out of the food we might get. So it increases function. So it's a brainstem, real fundamental. I got to get more sustenance. If it's the ducts and that's about getting bile out, that's a different tissue, and that's a territorial anger. I need to break down this situation that's totally unacceptable to me, and actually I need to process that. If we get a fatty liver, the fatty tissue is actually builds up around parts of our body to it's an I'm not good enough in this area. I'm not good enough, and I need to make this area better. The fatty tissue, adipose tissue, is a medulla tissue, but actually what's happening when you've got a fatty liver isn't what it sounds like when you've got a fatty liver. There's different things going on, and it's usually hormone related. So that is more complex in that what we're led to believe a fatty liver isn't. And cirrhosis, again, isn't. Cirrhosis is the scarring of it. So sometimes we are diagnosed with a fatty liver, and it's not actually that, and it's usually combined with other usually liver and gallbladder and other and pancreas usually have got a relationship with each other going on, where we're trying to hold on to store food because I can't get food, but there's other things going on, and potentially sometimes diabetes too. Diabetes is an interesting one because there's one or two triggers, either a dropping glucagon or a change in the beta islet cells that make or release the insulin. If we change the alpha islet cells that affect the glucagon, it's actually because we're actually using up the glucagon very quickly, because it's a fear disgust conflict. It's like something I just can't do, I don't want to do. It's the kind of thing that can be triggered with sexual abuse or being forced to eat something. It's a proper and actually we use the sugar up very quickly to respond, and almost to try to get rid of that sense of disgust. So basically all our sugar gets used up very quickly, and we use it to get rid of the yuckiness. But the other way is resistance, the beta islet cells. So what happens is, if you imagine you need to resist something over a long period of time. So imagine the demo I do in training is standing in a doorway, and I push my arms on the outside of the door, right? If I knew I had to stand there for 10 days pushing, I don't want all my energy to be used up at the beginning and then run out of energy. So the insulin levels change to stop me processing glucagon into the muscles or sugar into the muscles, because I need a reservoir. So basically I build up a reservoir of sugar in the blood. So I heighten the level of sugar in the blood. I keep it high so that it's slowly used. And of course, the problem is that's not what happens in us. We continue to go about the way we do things. So then it gets completely dysregulated. And in fact, when you've got one or other dysregulated, it's hard to get it back into balance. But it's usually a fear disgust or a resistance. I'm resisting something, somebody, a situation, a person. Chronic fatigue is a collection of symptoms. Quite often, second phase, stress. I'm not good enough. I'm not fast enough. I need to do more. I need to be better. I'm take on too much. I can't set boundaries. All kinds of reasons why people do too much and don't let go. But when I do, everything has to repair. Teachers who are too stressed to get ill, and then they go on holiday. When we have holidays, they have all of their illnesses. We can hold off symptoms with keeping our stress up, but then when we rest, everything goes into healing. That's when we can't concentrate anymore. We just want to curl up and rest and sleep lots. There's another kind which is different, and that is I'm moving in the wrong direction. This is not for me. This is the chronic fatigue that I had. I was in a situation and I remember the thought that this is not for me. So imagine you're in a car going 100 miles an hour down a road, and suddenly you think, hang on, is this right? Am I going the right way? Okay, and we slam the anchors on, and actually what the body does is it just says, hold on, just wait. So you'll notice the difference in that one, because with the other one, chronic healing, you don't want to think about anything. Your brain just goes to mush and fog, and because you're not meant to. If you've got fatigue from adrenal cortex, so the adrenals just go, we're not putting any hormones out there. We're not giving you any cortisol because we don't want you to do anything. You'll lie in bed. So this is me. I can't get up. I don't want to get up. I can't move. I'm so tired, but my brain is going, I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to do that. So it's different in that you're not actually in a fogginess of rest. Your body has said no, but your brain is going, oh, but I'm worried about that and I'm worried about that. And that's usually because your body is tired in the stress phase, not in the recovery phase. So, but yeah, usually we'd break it down into separate elements, because everything in a person with fatigue that aches or is tired or there's a specific reason. If someone's got leg ache and painful legs, there's a reason it's their legs. If someone's getting a lot of headaches and neck aches, there's a reason it's there. That tells us exactly what that person is experiencing. Fear, disgust, resistance, amazing. On point. Good. Okay. Colon inflammation, like irritable bowel, diverticulitis, and all of that. What's the other one? Crohn's, is indigestible anger. I need to work this out before I can let it go. I cannot let this go. It's not safe for me to let this go. But there's an element of so I had this irritable bowel as a teenager. My mom didn't get me, but I just couldn't understand why she doesn't get me. How come she cannot get me? And I couldn't let go of it because I thought I needed to know why. To be safe, I needed to figure out what that was about. So anything that is, imagine a dog that's chewed a bone and a bit of bone's got stuck in its intestine. It starts to increase the function in the intestine. It starts to make more tissue in the intestine, and it's trying to break the bone down. It's trying to move it along and get it out. And where you've got the problem and the tissue makes a difference. It's trying to get it along, trying to get it out. It wants to, but for us, we kind of hold on to something and we don't let it go. When we've processed it, now the tissue swells up. Every tissue in repair retains water, and that water actually helps the repair. But imagine your colon. So you've been constipated because you can't let go and it's all inflamed. Now you start to repair. All your beautiful microbes are starting to get better and repair. All your microbes are helping your tissue. Now you're all bloated. So everyone who thinks they've got an issue about bloating, you're probably helping your system, but it's not nice. You need to do it over a slow period of time. And all the water's there. And then when we have a healing peak and we want to get rid of the tissue and rid of the water, there's your diarrhea. Where suddenly we don't want that now and it's trying to get rid of it. So that's in your muscles, that would be your muscle cramps. And we experience that. So yeah, colon inflammation is, I can't process this. Which is different to, what's the gluten one? Celiacs, which is having a trauma when you've got certain things in your stomach that you don't want to hold on to because it's too dangerous. This is too dangerous for me to digest. I can't assimilate this. I can't take this in. But of course, the information you can't take in, your body doesn't know the difference and just goes, right, anything, we can't take that in, get rid of it. And now you've made an association. All phobias and all they're called things that you're allergic to, allergies, are all associations with a traumatic event. Small intestinal.
Can I, do you mind if I just before, because people are kind of, some people are leaving. Yeah, can I just give out, there's a URL I mentioned at the beginning, there's a little extra discount for those people who feel they're able to book by Sunday, by midnight on Sunday. And that is, let me just, there's a link, those who, if you can look in the chat, then you'll see a link coming up there. It's basically rebrand.ly/sam-webinar-special. And that's just £20 discount off the early bird rate. And you can pay that in 2 installments of 137. So that's an option. And if you have any questions, just email me or Sam and we'll get them answered.
Brilliant. So yeah, absolutely. If you've got questions, you can get back to us. if there's enough, we'll do a little half-hour Q&A, and I'll cover all of them. I can even if we don't have to get together, I can always just take them, make a video of my answers, and then you can just share the video. It might even be the easiest way to do. So if you've got a question,
Right.
feel free to ask, and I'll just record the answers as a little thing, and then we put that out. And I was supposed to make a slide to show you this information, but it took me a while to realize how many different sets of slides I'd got to put them together.
I think there's a way of sending that out to everyone who's signed up.
We'll do that as a brilliant email with all that information and a reminder. In fact, I'll do it straight away after.
Great.
So all the questions I haven't answered. So claustrophobia, again, that's a behavior, obviously. So somebody that has been trapped or been in a situation that they didn't feel they could escape, now is afraid of being fixed in again. If you're getting overheating, then the thalamus is involved. So it increases your metabolism to get you out, which is a very specific response. So it's usually being enclosed or being sometimes just restricted, and then the freeze of not being able to escape, run away. Basically, we're just avoiding the thing that traumatized us before, or either avoiding it. So when you talk about flight, fight, and freeze, I don't usually do that. I talk about escape, evade, and the purpose for it. The flight, fight, and freeze is the response. What we need to understand is what is the purpose of those responses. So what is it we need to do? So I need to escape something, evade something, or endure it. So the freeze is to endure it. If I can't escape it, evade it. Evading is the flight. Escape is to fight your way out, and then endure it is when we have to freeze. So it's usually a freeze response to having been restricted. So we'll put that out now to everybody and invite them to ask questions, and then we can go. This gets saved too, so we'll go over these questions, or I'll go over them tomorrow, and we'll make sure we answer them, and we'll make sure if anyone's got any more, if there's enough, we'll do a little Q&A and I'll answer them.
Great. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and thank you, big thanks for Sam. So much information just those last 10 hours. So, but like you say, you can go through the recording slowly. And
absolutely, I just thought, give you good value, and then you can take your time later on. But then what I hope you see is I am passionate about it, because everything is different once you get it. You can't see things, even if I've had a bad back this week. I thought I'd dealt with that, but there was something brand new. So, but I don't have an issue with it. I'm amazed that I can see what the issue was, because now I didn't know I had the problem, but I got a symptom. But now I know the symptom comes after. I can look back and go, oh yeah, I did feel I wasn't really. I needed to be stronger to be it was with Anton coming. I needed to be myself. I had a hip. We were arguing about some points, and I was obviously felt I needed to stand my ground with him. But at the time, I'm like, yeah, no, we're bantering. After he left, I went into healing. It was like, oh, that was obviously a bit of a bigger issue for me than I thought. Interesting. Okay, I need to be stronger in myself. What can I look at in my own work that I can work with that? So it's just a great gift.
I remember when I first did the course, people I knew were telling me about their physical, issues, and of course, if I knew the connection between those and the emotional, theme and behind it, then it felt like too much information. You're telling me too much, because they talk about my bad back, and it's not very personal to them. It's just a bad back,
No.
but then it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to know.
It's really important that when we have this is the fundamentals. When we have this, we're not suddenly bombarding people with that we're just asking how they are, asking how do you feel about that, okay, and then we can start offering them resources and solutions, because we've got an idea, and that's the coaching part of this. That's when they're ready, then you can start saying, what I've moved away from is going, oh, well, you've got a bad neck, so you've got justice issues, and you've got this and you've got that, right? So you need to fix that. And like, what? So, I mean, I once heard someone say to Sylvia Hartman, do you know why you're fat? Because you've got kidney cancer. I'm like, no, not only is that not correct, but you don't do that. She said, her answer was, do you know who I am? I'd rather teach the philosophy and the concepts, and then some of the details of it that but that you use it safely and you use it respectfully, really. Now, if we know that it's incredible intelligence, we then got to use our honoring the fact that it is that person's world and model, and that they are managing it as best they can, and helping them to see that first, then help them see that through understanding their own symptoms. That's really why I have to kind of put it out this way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's all absolutely fascinating.
Good.
Look forward to November.
Yeah, and like I say, we'll catch up. I'll check the list now, and we'll put this information out. So
Great.
thank you, everybody. And
thanks for me.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.